16 to 1, a podcast about education, teaching, and learning. Hello.
Hi.
How you doing?
Oh, great. How are you?
I'm doing well. Feeling rested, relaxed, energized. Happy to
Are you?
have a fun weekend coming up. My sister's in town.
We're recording early.
We are.
The dog is not interested.
No. We're a bit ahead of schedule from where we normally are.
Surprisingly.
Yeah, can you believe it? We're recording ahead of schedule because we're going to be traveling when this episode comes out.
Yeah. So we did our homework ahead of time.
We did. Can you believe it? I'm so happy for us. Thanks for sticking around. Thanks for listening. We're growing. Our audience is, Spotify is really helping us with discovery. So if you listen on Spotify, thank you so much. You're helping us. We don't know why it's happening, but
I have been a tried and true Apple Podcast girl, but apparently many of you are in the land of Spotify.
the Spotify fam is
So welcome.
stepping up. It's very interesting. There's some.
You're gonna have to make me start paying for that subscription now.
I guess
well.
so. I guess we're
One
just gonna
more.
have to do it.
What is one more subscription on my phone? Why
So
not?
thanks for listening. This is 16 to 1. We talk about education generally. Just reintroducing for new listeners. I'm Chelsea.
I'm Katie.
Yeah.
We're so glad you're here on episode
64?
6,323.
Oh, you added a few more in there. I don't remember editing 6,000 episodes. Oh,
Episode 64?
I think so.
Okay. Let me check the folder for one moment.
Oh, okay.
My handy dandy Google Drive.
Sorry, I'm like not saying anything. Like I want to say something that isn't just like, blah, blah, what's up, how's the weather, every single time. Like I'm trying to be like, I just don't know what to say though.
What, you don't like what's up, how's the weather? No one's interested in our intros anyways.
I know, but sometimes
They're skipping through.
But that's what I'm saying. We need to make it not skippable.
I'm very skippable.
Welcome.
Choose wisely.
Welcome to 16 to 1, a skippable podcast.
No, just a skippable intro.
I think we need like okay, listeners, listen. You need to write in and tell us how you like to get into your shows. Because, listen, I understand that you want to just get right to the meat of it. We're talking about TED Talks today. But we also, as educators, understand the importance of meeting your listeners where they are. And that sometimes involves brief niceties exchanged and several giggles.
I think the listeners should meet us where we are.
Okay.
Which is that episode 64, I've stopped worrying about an intro.
I know. But see, like,
I just assume that they're here for this.
Yeah.
I welcome them. I treat them as if they're my best friend.
You're here for our insights. You love our brains so much that you're here to listen.
Maybe
we're holding you captive for the next 45 minutes.
You are being held against your will in this podcast. Welcome.
No, but really, if you're a new listener, thank you so much for checking us out. We have a lot of fun putting on this show. We want to just say hi to anybody who's new out there. We're growing a little bit right now. If you wouldn't mind, just drop a like or a share or tell your friends about us. We really appreciate all the support we can get.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Why?
Why?
Why are they listening to us?
Yeah, why are you listening to us?
It's gotta be me.
We would love to know. Tell us why you're on this journey with us.
But really, it has been a lot of fun, and we're in an odd little season of growth, and it's exciting. So thank you.
Yeah. All right.
That's
so
the whole show. What if we just hung up?
What if we just start talking about random things for a couple of minutes so I can splice together an intro out of all of this?
You are the one who decided episode 64 it was time to reinvent the intro.
I'm just trying to shake it up.
It's in there.
I'm reinvent the intro?
Just that it took you 64 episodes to start to worry about it.
Well,
what happened today that you were like,
I've been worrying about it for a while.
You know what's not working? The intro.
I've been worrying about it for a while because I'm like, if I were listening to this podcast, I'd just skip until I got to the when they were
That's what they do.
No, but here's the real question. How do we make an intro that makes them not want to skip? That's the challenge.
Every podcast that I listen to that is similar 2 hours and that it's like very conversationally based has gone through this exact same thing.
Yeah.
And they pretty much always end up exactly where they were.
I mean, the thing is that I'm a fan of the pointless intro because I'm a fan of taking a minute to get into the mental space to hear a podcast episode that's a little bit longer. And I also like the little touches of personality that can come out from the hosts when they chit-chat without really having a purpose.
That's kind of what I think, too.
You know, I like that, but I'm sure there are many people who are just like, oh my goodness, shut up and get on with it.
Probably, but
But maybe those people who are like that don't listen to podcasts. Maybe they don't listen to podcasts because that's literally all podcasts are, is just like random people like talking.
Unless you're Phoebe Judge, you basically have no, like, if my voice was hers, I would just be like, hello.
Hello.
I would just be like, I'm Phoebe Judge. Exactly. Like, I don't bring that to the table.
I didn't do that very well. Sorry, Phoebe.
It actually wasn't that bad.
I haven't heard her very much, so you're more familiar.
Good.
But
it wasn't bad.
I know what you're talking about, though.
Yeah.
She's got a very distinct voice.
Unless you're Phoebe Judge or Roman Mars, you're not here for our voices anyways.
Oh, I do wish I had a good Roman Mars reverberation.
Here's the other thing, is that when we talk about our openings, we're opening it up to people telling us what we should be doing, and I'm really not interested in that in my podcast.
I mean, we are interested in, for example, topics that you might want to listen to a podcast about. So if you've got a show topic related to education, teaching, learning, schools, but also just like... You know, we're pretty broad. We're pretty broad with the subjects that we tackle.
We're broads.
We're broads. We're pretty broads. I mean, that's also true. We are pretty broads.
I think we should open up every episode with one knock-knock joke.
Knock, knock.
Who's there?
I don't have a joke.
Oh, I do. Ready?
What? Yeah. Knock, knock.
No, you don't.
Oh, okay. Who's there?
You do. I like that you didn't have the joke and you still led with that.
Yeah.
Do you know how these work?
Hey, I'm just going into the unknown.
Okay.
Very bravely.
Welcome to 16 to 1. Here's your introductory knock-knock joke.
Knock, knock.
No. You aren't the one who says knock-knock if you don't have a joke.
Oh.
Okay. Chelsea's never understood a knock-knock joke and she's 32 years old. Okay. All right, ready? Here's how they work.
I like to think of myself as reinventing the knock-knock joke.
I am now going to tell a knock-knock joke and you're going to sit there.
This is what I wanted. We just reinvented our intro right here. This is perfect. Go ahead.
Knock-knock.
Who is there?
Interrupting cow.
Interrupting.
No! Now we're going to talk about TED Talks.
Okay, the other thing we're going to reinvent is our segment transitions.
Nope, we're just...
Okay, now we're talking about TED Talks. Okay, we need to record in the morning more often, apparently, because this is
not the morning. It is noon.
It's morning for me.
Oh my God. See, the problem is that during
you
the
can
school
tell
year,
I'm not a classroom teacher. This is why. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, when we record during the school year, it's like 5 p.m. and you're in like your prime, and my brain is actual mush.
Maybe we should make an effort to like record on Saturday mornings or something. Like schedule it so that
I would welcome that.
Yeah,
that would be so much better for me.
Okay.
Because at 5 p.m., you know what the last thing is that I want to do? Sit in front of a microphone. Oh my God. Yeah. I'm still not over how broken your knock-knock joke was.
I liked my knock-knock joke. It just never ends. You just knock on each other's doors all day. That's the joke.
I just had coffee come out like this.
Yeah, I think I saw it come out a little bit.
Oh. What if we just said knock-knock back and forth for the whole episode?
Knock-knock.
We just refused to answer the door. Oh my God.
Yes.
Cold brew should not go up that high.
Oh, did you tickle your brain pan?
Oh, it is.
Okay, so are you ready to talk about our subject for the day? That we've struggled to get here, but we've plowed ahead, and now we're really ready to tackle it. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I just want to say that I don't think that was quite as successful as you hoped for.
The intro? The reinvention of our intro? Mm-hmm. No, I thought it was great. Okay. I don't care. Right. I'm going to splice it together and it's going to sound hilarious. Don't worry about it. All right. I got my coffee. You've got your cold brew in your nose. We're ready to start. What are we talking about today?
We're going to talk about TED Talks.
Tell us about, you really like TED Talks, don't you? Do you use them in your classroom?
Yeah, I use them almost weekly for the first semester. They're one of my favorite ways to teach writing, actually. So, for those of you that don't know.
Yes, TED.
What is TED?
TED
is a nonprofit that's devoted to spreading ideas, usually in the form of short, powerful talks that are 18 minutes or less. It began in 1984 as a conference where technology, entertainment, and design converged, and today covers almost all topics from science to business to global issues in more than 100 languages. Meanwhile, independently run TEDx events help share ideas in communities around the world.
Okay, so this is from their website, as you might be able to tell. TED is this kind of larger umbrella organization. You've probably heard of TED. They have a very large online footprint, which is one of the reasons why it's such a good tool for educators like Kate to use in the classroom. They provide free access to all of these talks that are recorded, really high quality recordings and stuff, good production value on this stuff of famous, influential, or just interesting people, I guess I would say. They bring in very big names, give them a pretty huge platform, and then these talks are recorded and released. I don't know if they still do it like one a day or not. I'm not sure.
Well, they have seasons you can check out on their YouTube, but I'm not sure.
They used to release a TED Talk every day, but like that might have been back in the day for TED, like when it first started happening, because that's when I was most paying attention to it when it first came around. But
who was on what day and what they were talking about.
Yeah. I guess that's not when TED first came around, because like you're saying, it started in 1984.
You were doing it before you were born?
I was doing it several years before I existed. I was watching TED Talks. So no, it started. I really love TED Talks. Okay,
I have loved TED Talks for so long,
so much that I saw into the future when I was unborn. Anyway, yeah. So you use TED Talks, the recorded versions of them, in your classroom, as kind of like writing.
Yeah, I use them to teach writing. Actually,
cool.
It's great.
So what, like typically, like how do you present that to your class and use it to kick things off? Like how would you incorporate these into your classroom?
So normally, I have, in 10 years, just collected a whole huge list of TED Talks that I love from all kinds of people on all types of things. And so, especially for my students, I try to have us watch videos and listen to speakers who aren't like us. And that's one of the best ways to do it.
Who aren't like us? Is that cool?
So people who don't look like they're from Appalachia, know? And so it's a great way to introduce my students who might not have many opportunities like this to hear from all kinds of people. And so I'll assign the video. They also usually have transcripts, which I love because my students, a lot of them like to read the transcripts rather than watch the videos.
I'm with those students, yeah.
And so I'll pose like 5 or 6 questions about the TED Talk or connections they can make, or they can write their own response to it, and they have to use quotes to support whatever their response is. So what I'm actually doing is preparing their writing for the end of course exam by using direct quotes and support. But it's also allowing them to respond in any number of ways, just based on their own thoughts or reflections or, just kind of what came to them as they were watching the TED Talk.
Cool.
And so one of my favorite parts about teaching TED Talks is that at the beginning of the year, I always start with the exact same TED Talk, and it's by a man. And all of my students automatically think that from then on out, every single person who speaks at a TED Talk is named Ted. And so when they quote them, they'll be like, Ted says, and I have to keep telling them that so far we actually don't have a TED Talk.
You don't actually have to rename yourself when you give a TED Talk. You don't have to go by Ted. But they'll do it with like
Brene Brown. They're like, Ted says the power of vulnerability, and it's Brene Brown. Like, it's so funny.
Miss Ted is talking about vulnerability today.
We have to go through and explain why Ted. So
this TED stuff started out as a conference and now has become this online resources that a lot of educators get to use, like you're talking about. Yeah. So this started as this conference, like I said. They cover technology, entertainment, design, but also business, science, global issues, really kind of anything. It's not
pretty much anything.
Yeah.
Even the Pope has done them.
Yeah, you can kind of find one for every occasion, like the search for invisible matter that shapes the universe, how data-driven journalism illuminates patterns of injustice, why art is a tool for hope. These are just some of the ones that are on the homepage right now on TED. So they're covering all kinds of topics. They're inviting all sorts of interesting people, innovators, business people, stuff like that. So we're going to give a little bit of a background and a history on TED. And a lot of this comes directly from their website. So it's kind of timeliney. I tried to strip out all of the like marketing-y language from all of this stuff. So it didn't sound like we were just promoting TED. Yeah. It is a great resource, but we're trying to talk about it impartially. But we'll give you the timeline of kind of how it evolved and how it became what it is today.
The hardest thing about this research was that like trying to learn about TED from somebody other than TED was just like, your top 10 videos about best leadership skills. Yeah. It was like, so it was a little...
The thing is that it really is about the content in this case.
Like, right, and not the actual platform so much as,
There's the platform stuff, it all sounds like marketing to speak because they're trying to sell you on the idea. But let's just run through it because I didn't actually know that it had been around for as long as it had been. It started in 1984. You want to take us through a little bit of history here?
So 1984, we have Richard Saul Wurman, and he has observed a powerful convergence among three fields: technology, entertainment, and design. And so he co-founded TED with another gentleman named Harry Marks. And at the first TED conference, they had a demo of the compact disc.
Oh, wow.
The ebook and cutting-edge 3D graphics from Lucasfilm.
Ooh.
Yeah. And so at that same first TED, the mathematician Benoit Mandelbrot demonstrated how to map coastlines using his developing theory of fractal geometry.
Wow.
So that's where it started.
Okay. Mandelbrot was there? Yep. I wonder if that's why I remember having several teachers along the way, like, I guess middle school. We were doing a lot of stuff with Mandelbrot sets and fractals and things like that. Like, we were making art out of it and stuff like that. I wonder if he was very popular at this time. Because if they had him at TED, then that means that, like, well, I mean, I really don't know anything about Mandelbrot other than just, like, some of the math stuff, like, personally. But interesting. That's interesting.
So that was the first TED conference. Okay. Even though they had Mandelbrot there, they lost money.
Yeah, and Mandelbrot wasn't a big draw.
Apparently not. And so they actually...
I would have been there for the Lucasfilm graphics. That's really cool.
I would have as well. That would have been enough for me to
get there. And demoing the CD in 1984, demoing a compact disc. Can you imagine being there for the demo of the compact disc? Golly, that's interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so didn't go well.
Okay.
So they take a 6-year break.
Oh.
And so in 1990... they tried again. And after that, then it did become an annual event. And to begin with, it was in Monterey, California.
So the idea at first was to just have this be like a conference that happened every so often and famous kind of influential people would show up and talk at it. That was the idea.
Yeah, and it was just kind of around this idea that they could combine technology, entertainment, and design. So all of the, I guess probably earlier on more than now, all of those speakers were probably somehow addressing all of those things.
I mean, it's kind of like us with our podcast, I feel. I feel like their take on technology, entertainment, and design is sort of like our take on education, teaching, and learning, where we pull a lot of things under that umbrella because it, it's broad. But yeah, they touch on a lot of stuff. So anyway, okay. All right, what's the next
So 1990, that's when it became an annual event. And so it continues that way. So in 2000, a guy named Chris Anderson gets involved. And he discussed with Wurman, one of the original co-founders, the conference's future. And so that year they struck a deal. And in 2001, Chris Anderson's nonprofit called the Sapling Foundation acquired TED. And Chris Anderson became its curator. Okay. So it's grown up enough now that it's starting to kind of move into a larger foundation itself. So between 2001 and 2006, TED grows and it has 3 huge additions that come out of it. So the first is that they now have a sister conference called the TED Global, which is what it sounds like. They have a TED Prize, and they have an audio and video podcast series called TED Talks. And this is what most of us today know and love TED. Or know about TED, I should say.
When I first learned about TED, I did not realize that it was primarily the in-person conference. I knew it as the sort of internet distributor of interesting talks. So yeah, it evolved into that, and that's where they really kind of found their stride, I think. Yeah.
TED Talks were posted online on June 27th, 2006, and by September of that year, they had already reached more than 1 million views.
Which doesn't sound like a lot now, but at the time was.
June to September, that's a lot. Then, in 2007, TED's website was relaunched around the world, and it gave the global audience totally free access. So before that, you could go in person to see it, or you could just see what they had been originally posting, which isn't every TED Talk, obviously, but just the ones that
I think they still don't post every
They
TED
still
Talk.
don't, no, because that's one of the benefits of going to the conference is you get a backlog of TED Talks that haven't been pushed publicly.
So the conferences themselves they still happen, but they're very expensive. Basically, they use the conferences as like a handshakey meet and greet, very expensive ticket. They use all the revenue from that to fund the distribution of the videos to a global audience.
For free.
Yeah, people can watch the talks for free, but you don't necessarily see all of the talks because we'll talk about this a little bit later, but some people have accused them of like censoring certain content because it's not friendly to the audience or not friendly to the business goals of TED. So we'll talk about that. But anyway, all right, continue.
Okay. So they've relaunched the TED website, basically focusing on the videos, and that's what allows the global audience free access.
Right.
In 2008, they launched what's called TED Active, which is the simulcast version of the Springtime TED Conference, which allowed...
So is that like... simulcast is like just like a live
I think it was a live stream of that
live
conference.
Stream of the conference?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
And so just to kind of give you some context, I'm jumping ahead a year, but by 2009, the number of TED Talk views had grown to 100 million views. So we've gone from 2006 to 2009 with 100 million views on their videos.
Okay.
So also in 2008, though, they launched the TED Fellows program, and that helps innovators to attend the conference for free. And then they also have TEDx Start. And so TEDx, you've probably seen these videos on YouTube, but it's a radical opening up of the TED format. And so what it does, though, is it allows local communities and smaller, I would say oftentimes cities, to host kind of like a pop-up TED event where they pick and choose who gets to speak.
Yeah.
And so it's not, I don't want to say it's not affiliated with TED, but it's not, it will always say it's a TEDx, and that's how you know that it came from a group using TEDx as a way to...
They're using the model, the distribution channels, stuff like that, but they're not officially like vetted or endorsed. The content of those TEDx events is not vetted or endorsed by TED, the overall official organization.
If you're on the TED website, I don't think I've seen maybe but a couple TEDx videos even on the TED website.
Yeah, they don't, and this is another thing we'll talk about in the criticism section, the lack of vetting at TEDx, because they tend to be, community organized events, local, and you'll see this with other kinds of conferences. They'll have like distributed smaller events throughout the year with local organizers. So TED does have a model in place to help local organizers organize TEDx events, but there's a little less oversight. Yeah. Well, a lot less oversight from the national, sort of like internationally recognized TED. Sure. There. But yeah.
And the last thing from 2008 is that they create the TED Translator program. And that's what created the infrastructure for TED Talks to be translated into more than 100 languages.
Yeah, that's no small task for an organization like TED, because we've even talked on our podcast where we don't monetize it right now. I don't know if you've noticed that, but there are no ads on this podcast right now. We're talking about, and we hope you stick with us through this journey, we're talking about hopefully maybe sometime introducing some kind of partnerships and stuff so that we can start to do things like pay for transcription. So that's what I was just talking about with TED. Transcription, can you imagine transcribing that much video content? So we don't currently transcribe our podcasts because it's just a hugely time-intensive process. You have to like have a real human being sit there and listen to what you've said.
And we have no money.
And it costs money. So anyway, we want to be able to do that someday, provided like transcription services. But TED is like, you've got thousands and thousands of hours of video probably at this point. So it's just like, that's a big undertaking to translate into however many different languages, all of those talks, because the content is really good. But yeah, that's no small initiative there.
Okay. So jumping ahead.
Yeah.
2012. TED launches TED Ed, which the goal was then to create short video lessons aimed at educators. And also in April of 2012, there was the debut of the TED Radio Hour. And that was just a partnership that brings ideas and stories from TED Talks to public radio listeners to make it even more accessible.
Yeah, I used to listen to a lot of NPR when I had a commute around Baltimore, and I really haven't listened to a lot of public radio since then, sadly. But I do still listen to public radio shows in podcast form, and I'm pretty sure that the TED Radio Hour has a podcast as well. So
in the fall of 2012, they got its 1 billionth video view.
Wow.
And just to kind of give you an idea, right now, according to TED's website, they're averaging about 17 new page views a second.
It's a lot of traffic.
And I checked out their YouTube. So the thing to keep in mind about views when we talk about views is that if you go to TED's website, there are videos on there that have like 50 and 60 million views. And those videos can also be found on their YouTube channel with tens of 20s of 30s of millions of views. So to say how many views all of TED has is really not possible. But I did check on their YouTube channel yesterday. The YouTube channel, TED, was created December 6, 2006. They, as of late July of 2022, had 21.6 million subscribers. And their YouTube views are over 2,364,000.
Wow.
Now, that does not combine, obviously, however many, I'm going to say billions of views on their TED website. Because in my case, for my classroom, I link all of my students to the actual TED website because it's not blocked.
Oh.
Whereas YouTube is blocked.
So if you're a classroom educator, you probably know that districts lock down certain domains so that kids can't get themselves into trouble. Right. That makes sense. So they haven't locked down TED.
Exactly.
Okay.
But that's why it's very hard to say where their views are because they can post them obviously in both places.
Yeah. TED is actually kind of unique that way. It looks like I just brought up their website and it looks like they're not, because sometimes organizations like that will just embed from their YouTube so that all of the watches are the same. But you're right. This is a separate viewing metric here.
Yep. And that's actually why I love their website so much is that it's something that my students can access. I don't have to download it. I don't have to create, you know what I mean? There's a lot of workaround that teachers have to do to show YouTube videos.
Yeah.
And so I love TED because I don't have to.
Yeah.
They make it so easy.
They make it so easy.
But that's why I kind of wanted to preface their YouTube metrics because it's very hard to say exactly what that would be like. Mm-hmm. But 21.6 million subscribers and 2 billion views isn't bad. Mm-hmm. Okay.
All right. How do you get chosen to speak at these things?
You got to know somebody.
You got to know somebody? You
have to be. Yeah. Well, so the big TED conference, like the original TED, those are some pretty big name people. I mean, we are talking like the Pope has done TED Talks.
This is usually very famous and influential people, like Nobel Prize winners and that kind of stuff.
Knighted people.
That's
what our question of the week is, or question of the episode is about this time. So knowing somebody is really helpful. Having some lived experience is very helpful, obviously.
You can also, though, nominate yourself to be a TED speaker if you want.
You can apply.
If you feel like you are the world's most interesting man, you can nominate yourself to be a TED speaker.
You can. So there is a little bit of groundwork that you could do to become a TED Talk presenter. But by and large, if you were to go look on the TED website, you would probably recognize many of the names just because of lived experience, I would say. Mm-hmm. Now, TEDx does not work that way. Those are the local events that pop up around the globe. And those people usually maybe hold a much smaller audience. Not quite as big. I hate to say they're not big names, but because there have been some famous authors who have done TEDx's and things like that, but those are just the local events. So it's usually like if it's your hometown or, you know what I mean? Like those are the kind of people that they get to speak there. Mm-hmm. So there might be community leaders, local politicians, things like that, business owners around the town or whatever. But for the big TED, it's quite a, it's pretty hard to get a position speaking for one. And I'll talk about this a little bit later as well, but the public speaking skills that you see on display when you watch a TED Talk are some of the best speakers that you can see. And so that's the other reason I really love to show them to my students is because these people are so good at what they do. Mm-hmm. And TED, I think, allows for that to happen because of its concise nature. Yeah. And I just, even just watching these people speak is a show in itself. Yeah. Not only do they have incredible things to share, but just like to appreciate the skill of speaking is just, that's what strikes me as being so cool about TED Talks is that the way that these people tell their stories is so incredible. And that's why it is such a hard gig to land, because you have to have a story worth telling or something worth sharing, and you have to be very good at conveying it. And that's what's hard.
Yeah, I've actually heard criticisms of TED because the speakers, I've heard people be like, well, the speakers are too good. So like you're just paying attention to the way they talk instead of what they say. Like the fact that they're good rhetoricians. Also, yes. We've even talked about this though, but the fact that somebody is good at rhetoric is not an automatic put off for me. I enjoy somebody who can speak well talking about something. So it's definitely worth it.
That's one of the things that we always
I don't want to listen to some boring lecturer drone on.
Right.
I love to listen to a dynamic speaker talk about whatever.
And it's funny you say that because, like I said, my students watch a lot of TED Talks from a lot of people. And I will sometimes show them the David Blaine TED Talk. And he's the magician who can like hold his breath underwater for long. You know what I mean? And if you haven't heard David Blaine speak, he's very intentional.
He's pretty weird. He's definitely got a speaking style that is a little strange if you're not used to it.
It's always so funny when my kids get to that TED Talk because they're like, it's so slow.
You're like, why is he talking like this?
He's so, and he doesn't have a lot of inflection. I mean, he's a great speaker.
He just has his own style for sure.
Yeah, he's just like, okay, well, then I just held my breath. And it's just like that. But Alex Honnold is the same way. The guy who climbed El Cap. So it actually is a great learning moment for my students because we talk about what's the difference in watching Shonda Rhimes or Brene Brown speak, and then you watch David Blaine, or like it's fun. I actually like that part of it. So.
Yeah, talking about different ways that rhetoric can work on people.
So one thing worth noting about obviously not only being a teacher but knowing what works for your classroom is that there are limits to our students' attention spans.
There's a limit to my attention span.
There's a limit to yours.
Getting shorter every day.
Yours is about the same as my teenagers. So I just wanted to say something. This is another reason why I appreciate TED Talks as much as I do, is because of their length. That's what's critical about them. And so I found an article from the Life Sciences Education, Volume 15 from CBE. And this article was by Cynthia J. Brame. And basically, her article was about teaching biology, but it was assessing...
With video content? Is that okay.
Yeah. But it was assessing how the length of videos and their effectiveness. And basically what she found is that 6 minutes is like the sweetest spot.
Yeah, probably for younger learners especially.
For sure.
Yeah.
Now, I have been told this multiple times, and I could not find an article where it said this, so I don't know who said this to me to start with, but this has stuck with me. But I was always told you don't want to show a video that is any longer than the kids are old, basically.
Number of minutes and age in years.
Yep. So like my kids are 15, 16 years old. And so I usually try to find videos that are 15 or 16 minutes long.
Gotcha.
Which is why TED Talks are perfect, which is why Crash Course by the Green Brothers is perfect. So I can usually keep them for like 20 at the most, but most TED Talks are under 18. So I love that about TED Talks because it's actually built for young minds to be able to be able to pay attention for that long. And also because a very real part of me thinks that even for some of the most complicated things, if you can't give me an idea of it in 20 minutes, I'm probably not going to, you know what I mean? Like, I just think that's good public speaking. So, yeah, it's great for my learners because they can't possibly do 30 or 40 minutes of some of these topics, but they can do 15 or 16 minutes. So that's the other reason. And I'll include the link to this article, but it basically just suggests that 6 minutes is a sweet spot for almost all learners. I shouldn't say almost, a lot of learners.
We talked about this a little bit with sort of like, I mean, we've had various topics about technology and education and just different like attention issues in classrooms and stuff like that. So we've talked about this on several other episodes of the pod, but there are challenges that are specific to using video for learning.
So if I find, a 7 or 8 minute video, I'll usually be okay with that. I try not to go any shorter than that because I actually need them to have content to be able to quote from in order to do my, writing assignments. But I really go for like 12 to 16 minutes. That's a pretty sweet spot for most students. So, and this, like I said, this article was just kind of data that supported that this is appropriate for, especially for learners of, my kids, like, which are teenagers.
I think that's probably a good tip. Length in as number of minutes as you are old. I wonder how long that stays true, what the upper limit for that is.
I mean, I think yours is going down. As you
Yeah,
get
that's what I'm saying. There's probably a point past which that's no longer true, but
I mean, I do show some longer interviews and things like that, and those feel a little bit different to me. Like when I teach my Holocaust unit, you know, I'll show interviews of survivors and things like that. Those could be 30, 40 minutes, but that's usually because we're just watching for the story. We're not watching it as far as creating a written response from it. So I think that the goal of the lesson also impacts, you know what I mean, how long the video should be. But in my case, because my students are doing written responses, it needs to be long enough that they can get
actually
quotes and
talk
support
about
out
something.
of it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of also the reason for why I go for that length, just because I need my kids to have enough to write about.
Cool.
So.
Okay. Well, why don't you tell us about a couple of upcoming chances for people to encounter TED conferences in the wild?
Okay, so the first conference coming up is October 24th through 28th of 2022. It is an online event, and it is called TED Women Presents. And it is going to be an event that offers interviews with leading women on change, on work, on rights, on joy, and on the future. And that's from their website.
Oh.
And you can apply online to attend virtually, and the link is in the show notes.
Cool.
Okay. TED for 2023 is going to be held in Vancouver, Canada, April 17th through 21st.
Oh, this is like the big one.
This is the big one.
Okay.
It is called Possibility.
Possibility.
The show notes will also include the link for this. But if you want to go, good luck, because you have to become a member, and your donation starts at a minimum of $5,000, and it goes to $25,000, and you must apply and be accepted.
Yeah. So
wait for it to drop on TED.com.
Yeah, this is a good segue into some of the criticisms of TED, because definitely the pricing model of the live conferences is one of the things that people talk about, because like you said, donations start at $5,000. There's a kind of charge of elitism sometimes leveled at TED because of this, like you have to apply and you have to give a lot of money and all of this stuff. But like, I'm okay with the way that TED operates because their whole point is distributing the videos globally for free. Like, I get why people are a little about the in-person conference and how expensive it is and how it kind of does seem to be gatekeeping a lot of the world out of the live conferences. But like I've said, I mean, maybe this is just my misunderstanding of TED, but kind of for me, the primary purpose of TED, at least since they became very popular, has been TED Talks. So like, and those are, like I said, free and online. So, you know, I get it. It makes me feel a little squishy that these conferences are so expensive because, like, for example, classroom educators are never going to be able to afford to like make the donos required to attend a live TED. Like, and they're missing out on a diversity of voices in those live events, at least with the attendee makeup.
Audience.
Yeah. But you can see where people are also saying, okay, well, if this is your audience, your speakers are obviously chosen to speak to this audience. So you're not really reaching as broad of an audience as you could be, mostly for a lot of these money related factors. So that's one criticism that they get. There have been various points in time where kind of some famous folks have spoken out about this a little bit. There's a guy named Frank Swain. He's a journalist. He refused to participate in a TEDx event because TED does not pay speakers. It does not pay the people who are generating the content. A lot of people look at TED Talks as a jumping off point for all kinds of further partnerships down the road, and TED, I think, kind of considers that to be. And they also offer, you know, hotel and like a swag bag and all kinds of like conference stuff.
Oh yeah,
you know, they get conference tickets for the week. So like people who are talking there, it's worth their time for a lot of different reasons. But anyway, the whole point being they don't pay the speakers. And so there's this journalist guy who got kind of irritated because he was speaking at a TEDx event and not being paid. He said it's unacceptable for TED as a nonprofit to charge attendees of the conferences $6,000, but while they prohibit organizers of TEDx events from paying speakers. So again, we talked about that. This is what TED says about it. They say, we do not pay speakers. We do, of course, cover travel costs, provide excellent hotel accommodation. So that's everything that I just talked about. There are all these benefits of speaking at TED. But they don't pay speakers. So yeah, it's basically just kind of an argument about the nonprofit funding model that TED uses to operate.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know. What we're sort of describing with TED is also kind of how I feel about Masterclass.
Yes, Masterclass makes me feel the same way. It's very expensive for a random classroom educator to be able to afford.
It is. And The things that we've watched on there have just been so incredible that I wish that everyone could afford them. But I can't imagine trying to run a website that holds billions of views that are free to people over the world, that have been translated into hundreds of languages. I guess as an educator, I can write it off as like an okay thing.
Yeah.
Because it's so worth it for me to have these chances for my students to watch them.
That's the reason I feel okay about it. And again, this part of it is because as a web developer, I know the tech costs of hosting and hosting that much content and dealing with that much traffic. They're not insignificant costs to maintain the kind of internet-based infrastructure that TED has. So like, it's a very expensive venture to deal with that much content and traffic on the internet, first of all. And then second of all, like you said, it may be the case that not every single TED Talk becomes live online, but what they do provide for free, to me, kind of offsets some of these concerns. And I don't mean to be like a TED apologist about this, but it just seems to me that there are checks and balances here. And on the whole, what TED is providing, especially to educators, is a good service. So anyway, that's just one point of contention that people have had.
I mean, it is expensive, don't get me wrong, but if I'm thinking, oh, is it worth it to pay $6,000 to go? Probably not for me.
Yeah, I just can't imagine ever wanting to go. Well, I mean, it would not that it wouldn't be cool to see these speakers live, where it's like famous business people come and talk on the stage, and just like you could actually see and hear them better from the TED view, recorded and shared at home.
And I mean, TED, the conference has a ton of things that happen there. It's not just watching these people speak, obviously. So I'm sure that it would. I mean, of course, on the TED website, they're like, well, the tax write-off is this, so they know what they're doing, and here's the actual worth of what you pay for, things like that. But I don't know. I'm okay with it. I'm not gonna be mad at TED about the cost of attending. Yeah, I'd probably rather watch on my computer anyways.
I actually have more concerns in this particular case about some of these other things and the other 2 points of criticism. I mean, not that there haven't been more, but there was an investor, I think his name Nick Hanauer, in 2012. He gave a TED Talk presentation about income inequality, wealth gaps in America, and basically said that rich people should pay more in taxes. And TED's curator, Anderson, he kind of just was like, I don't know, this one seems a little too controversial. So they caught some flack for that, for basically somebody, I think it's a journalist, called a massive money-soaking orgy of self-congratulatory futurism.
That feels like a bit much.
Self-congratulatory futurism. I do get this charge because sometimes TED, this is the rhetoric thing that we were talking about. The rhetoric can be a little hopey changey, kind of, without necessarily as much behind it sometimes. Like I get that. There is definitely this, let's all pat each other on the back for our ideas of how to change the world without necessarily following through. I understand why certain media commentators might feel that way about TED.
Yeah.
The other thing is misinformation and overgeneralization. So we talked about TEDx and vetting. There's been a lot of misinformation talk around TEDx events because they will do things like invite people to present on totally made up mathematics. Like, there's some guy who talked about, like, I think he was talking about something called like vortex mathematics or something, but he was basically like making something up and gave a TEDx talk, and they were like, there's something
that's part of the TEDx though.
Yeah, that's
anyone can do them.
Yeah. So these are problems of misinformation and content, especially on the internet generally. So these aren't specific to TED, but TED does have this problem. Yeah. There's a 2013 article for The Guardian by Benjamin Bratton. He claims that TED is actually middlebrow megachurch infotainment.
Okay.
Where audiences prefer presenters such as journalists who recycle...
These people will really quote anybody.
Yeah, well...
Infotainment, okay.
Where audiences prefer presenters such as journalists who recycle fake insights to actual scientists who produce actual knowledge. They've been accused of making the simple sound profound. And my response was like...
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, what is wrong with someone who is also a skilled orator presenting on a subject? And I think the other thing about these people is that they're wanting TED Talks to be more like masterclasses, which are hours and hours long, in-depth.
Right. That's not the goal.
So basically, the criticism here is kind of like a criticism of pop science in general. So like writing that is writing and speaking intended for lay audiences that are a way into complicated topics. Now, I think the issue with these people is they're looking at TED Talks as the end of learning rather than the beginning, the thing that sparks your interest.
That's a good point.
Yeah. TED Talks should be not the end of your learning about a topic, but the beginning of your learning about a topic. Personally, I think.
Well, and I know I've said this before on here, but I've heard this before, but like if you can't understand something simply, you don't understand it. And so that's kind of what comes to mind with these TED Talks. The point is simple because they only have such a short amount of time to teach you anything.
Yeah.
So actually, I'm more impressed when they can do something very complex very quickly because I'm like, oh, well, never mind. They
I get
really
it.
do get it.
Yeah, I mean, I understand it if you just look at a TED Talk and be like, well, this is all I'm ever going to learn about it and treat it as all you need to know. But I don't ever treat a short video.
I don't think that many people do.
A short video that introduces a complex topic in a way that is accessible to many people. That's not a bad thing, but you can't look at it as the end of the learning about that thing. And then you're fine. Anyway. So yeah, like I said, check out our Pop Sci episode because we talked about this too, but just the difficulty of translating complex topics into short media bits that can be digested by lots of people. It's a very difficult task. You don't always get it right, but also I think it's worth trying because I think it's worth bringing in like your kids in your classroom. It's worth bringing people into new ideas, new experiences, things they haven't thought about before from perspectives and people they might not have encountered before. So that's what you're saying, like introducing these kids to something that is different from what they're used to seeing in their day to day. It's a very important thing to do. So anyway, interesting criticisms. I don't mind.
Kind of, I don't know. I understand it. You know, people are going to criticize everything. This doesn't feel like something I mean, if they're taking down videos because of political whatever, I would hope that it goes all directions. But I don't know, well enough about that to say certainly.
Yeah, they've gotten
exactly
right. They've gotten a little hot water because they've done this a couple of times. They've deplatformed for like political or apparently political reasons, or they've just not chosen to put certain talks online for a broader audience because of issues with the talks or whatever it is. So, but again, like there is a curator who makes decisions about what counts as a TED Talk, and like it's a human being who has human biases and opinions and feelings about what TED should be like. So it is up to the person who's curating it to determine and that, it's going to reflect that person's tastes. Honestly, I kind of maybe prefer it a little bit to this sort of algorithmically generated nonsense that we have now. Like a real human who is imperfect about curation sort of appeals to me more than an algorithm, I guess. So even if it's imperfect, it's an interesting system.
I agree.
Well, why don't you tell us about, just run down on a few of your favorites.
This was so hard.
Your hits, your greatest hits. TED Talks.
Was so hard. Okay, so I kind of already talked about how I use them in my classroom. Using them in the classroom for me is normally based around a writing assignment as a response where my kids have to pull quotes to support opinions or thoughts or remarks. You can also just pair them up with whatever kind of content you're teaching. I had a really hard time with this list. It was much longer. And I tried to...
You pared it down a bit.
I did. Okay. So I already talked about Brene Brown. I love Brene Brown. So her TED Talk, The Power of Vulnerability, is a great one. Shonda Rhimes, another favorite of mine, of course. It's called My Year of Saying Yes to Everything. If you don't know who Shonda Rhimes is, she is the creator of Scandal and How to Get Away with Murder and some of the best TV shows of the past 10 years. Amanda Gorman, the poet who presented at Joe Biden's inauguration. She has a couple on here. One of my favorites is called Using Your Voice as a Political Choice. And I really like that with my students because she's also a young woman who's kind of going through all of that. George Takei, one of Chelsea's Star Trek guys.
Yes.
He does a TED Talk called Why I Love a Country That Once Betrayed Me because he and his family were put in a Japanese internment camp during World War II in the United States. I teach that with my Holocaust unit and my kids really like his story. I use Sue Klebold's book, her TED Talk, which is based on also her book. She was the mother of one of the Columbine shooters. And so she talks about, her TED Talk is called My Son Was a Columbine Shooter. This is my story. And all of these will have the links in the show notes. last couple that I love, my students really love this TED Talk, and it's definitely one of my top 3. It's by Phyllis Rodriguez and Aisha El-Wafi, and it's called The Mothers Who Found Forgiveness, Friendship. And Phyllis Rodriguez's son was killed in 9/11.
Wow.
And Aisha's son was convicted with conspiracy as part of 9/11.
Oh, wow.
And so these two women travel together and speak, and just their relationship is really, really incredible. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's, she's done a couple, but her Dangers of a Single Story is tied for my first place of all-time favorite TED Talk. She's an incredible author as well, if you don't know Chimamanda. And my favorite TED Talk is actually Monica Lewinsky's, and it's called The Price of Shame. And it resonates so well with my teenagers as we talk about social media and our treatment of others and things like that.
Yeah, in case you don't know, Monica Lewinsky has kind of become a...
You know Monica Lewinsky.
You've probably heard of her if you live in the United
You know
States.
Monica Lewinsky.
But you might not know that she now spends a lot of time advocating online for sort of anti-bullying stuff, because she...
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, she talks about in the TED Talk how many rap lyrics she's been included in. And so I've actually had a couple students say...
That's really uncomfortable.
Oh, is that the woman that's in this song? And I'm like, please don't play it. Please don't play it. Please
don't
play it.
whatever it is, don't play it. I don't want to hear it.
Sorry. But my students have even heard of her, and not... Well, it is for the reason you'd think, but not in the context you expect.
So as a kid watching Monica Lewinsky's name get thrown around in the 90s because of the Clinton administration, that whole thing, watching that on TV, and I was very young at the time, so some of this can be forgiven, but some of it really can't. But like, I watched that and bought into what I was hearing at that time, which was that Monica Lewinsky was like this pesky, ornery person who ruined a marriage and blew up the White House. Like, that's very much what
It's almost like that's what the narrative...
Very much what the media narrative was. And just as a kid watching all of this, what the message that I took away from all of the coverage of this was that Monica Lewinsky was like an evil person who should be shunned into outer space, basically. And, you know, Monica Lewinsky's personal failings as a young woman in the White House aside, now looking back on that time, just like the way she was eviscerated by the media and continued to be eviscerated by then social media afterwards. Like, we've made a joke out of a young woman's like, how old was she at the time?
I think she was 21. I'm trying to look. Yeah, so she started when she was 21.
Yeah.
Or worked there when she was 21. Sorry.
Anyway, long story short about Monica Lewinsky is that she was a 21-year-old girl. I mean, unpaid intern in the White House. And the president of the United States was very attracted to her. And that's the story. And treating that whole scenario with much more human compassion than I was capable of mustering at the time. It's just a very different story, kind of looking back on it now, at least for me. And it's so she's a very interesting person because she has a lot to say about the entire country hating her all at once. And again, like, debating the rightness or wrongness of her individual actions, that's fine. But like, definitely we can all see the impact of the way the media treated her. So she has, I've watched that TED Talk, and it's a pretty interesting one because it's...
Her Twitter is a gift as well, might I just add. Monica Lewinsky is doing some very hard work.
Also, can you imagine your entire life being defined by this thing that happened to you when you were 21? So she's got a lot to say about what has happened since then, the ways narratives around these things have evolved.
It's great for high schoolers to watch.
Yeah.
I mean, it is... That's why I say I think it's my favorite.
Interesting.
I would not have the guts that she has.
Yeah.
I would be hiding in a hole still if I was her.
Well, I think she kind of explains that she kind of tried to do that for a while.
Yeah, and it didn't work either. But
she's like, everyone knew. Anyway, yeah.
So,
cool.
Those were 8 of my favorites, I would say. There's a lot of really good ones. I will link all of these because they are worth watching and listening to. And there are thousands of other stories, and they're worth watching and listening to. But as an educator, I'm really thankful for TED. A lot of the speakers even that I just talked about are people that don't look like people you see in Appalachia. And so I'm thankful for those voices, because that's one of the hardest things to get for my students is those perspectives. And TED has made it very easy for me.
Yeah.
So big TED fan, will continue being a big TED fan just because of its access, you know. And because now I know as a teacher that most of the really good stuff isn't free. And so TED is. So
cool.
Good for TED. They got a podcast. They got a YouTube. Everything will be linked.
Okay.
But please don't quit listening to us and only listen to TED. Okay. We're important too.
A little podcast that could. Okay, cool.
Any last thoughts of yours?
No, I haven't had as much recent exposure to TED Talks to know what's kind of popular on the site these days, but I definitely have seen a fair number of them. And like I said, I think they're all interesting jumping off points. Like if you want an introduction to a subject, they're not very deep content wise, like you're talking about, but they can lead to deep content work. I think they're good because they get people excited about the idea of learning, which is difficult to do. Yeah. But it's, for me, somebody who just likes to learn no matter what I'm learning about.
TED Talks are great for
that. Yeah. It's like, that's why I like to listen to podcasts, the podcasts that I do as well, because a lot of them kind of cover a pretty broad range of topics, and it's just a good way to become introduced to more of what's going on in the world. You just know more about the universe around you when you listen to a broad range of this stuff. Now, like I said, they're often not the end of research about a particular thing because they don't go super, super deep. But as introductory encounters... But they don't have to.
Right. Not all of them have to.
Right. As introductory encounters with new principles and ideas, definitely worth a watch, I think.
I think so, too.
For the most part.
Okay.
Are we ready to do...
Shall we do our segue of another knock-knock joke?
Another knock-knock joke? Yep, knock-knock.
You don't know any. I'm not falling for this. Nobody's at the door.
Knock, 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 knock.
Who's there?
Me. It's time for fill in the blank. Ready? Let's go.
Go ahead.
All right, so fill in the blank.
I could not be less impressed by that, let me just tell you.
It was a terrible transition. Fill in the blank is our segment where we ask you, the listeners, to answer a trivia question about education, sort of, kind of.
So what's last episode's question?
Last episode's question. Would you like to do it, or would you like me to? Okay.
You can.
I will. Last episode, we talked about the national teacher shortage. And with that, we talked a lot about money, because funding for education systems is not as solid as it should be, at least in this country. So here's the question, last episode's question. In the United States, an upper secondary school teacher with 15 years of teaching experience makes about $65,200 a year on average, according to the latest salary data from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. That puts the U.S. behind Ireland, Australia, the Netherlands, Canada, and Germany, as well as this country, which leads the world in teacher pay, with an average pay of $109,200 for upper secondary teachers with 15 years of teaching experience. So what is that country that pays its teachers so well? And that is Luxembourg, that tiny little country. You know, Luxembourg is really weird, geographically, politically, economically. I follow some web development people on Twitter who live in Luxembourg, but do not, or no, sorry. Yeah, I think they're citizens of Luxembourg, but they don't live in Luxembourg. They live just outside the country somewhere, and they have all these really weird commuter laws and stuff. Anyway, it sounds like a very interesting place because it's so tiny, really? And they don't have, you know,
How small is it?
Very, very small. Area, here we go. Okay, it's only about 1,000 square miles.
Its population is 645,000 people.
Yeah, so it's very small.
That's smaller than the whole city of Columbus.
It is. It's very small.
Small.
So anyway, interesting.
Oh my goodness, it's a little baby place.
It's interesting that they pay their educators so well. I wonder why. I don't understand European politics well enough to understand this, but yeah.
I was going to say something.
Okay.
Oh, okay. About the last episode. We talked about the teacher shortage. If you have not been following along on the teacher shortage, turn on the news, because it is everywhere right now in the news.
Ramping up.
And Florida has just changed to allowing, what is it? Is it military?
Yeah, military. I don't even know why. But just like military people can just randomly teach in classrooms.
So anyways, Florida just had a new has a new marker for people that can be teachers, and it has just been all over. And I feel like the day that we released that episode, it just like got back in the news, so that was perfect timing. But yeah, so the teacher shortage is hitting hard right now. So
yes, everyone's panicking because we're about to go back to school and all the schools everywhere are like, oh no.
Okay.
Anyway, okay, this episode's question, fill in the blank. Again, this is an interactive segment. Please write into us at hello@16to1.com with your answers. We will send you a sticker.
This is the interactive knock knock joke part of the episode. Okay. This episode's question.
Yes.
This famous educationalist gave 3 TED Talks by the time of his death in 2020, one of which has the most views of any video on TED's website. During his life, this famous educator got his start as director of the Arts in Schools Project, an initiative to develop arts education throughout England and Wales. Following great success of that and other similar programs, he was knighted, published more than a dozen written works on education, and even served as a senior advisor for education and creativity at the Getty Museum in Los Angeles. Who is this famous educator?
I know this one, actually.
You knew it?
I knew it.
Without reading the show notes?
I did.
Really?
Really?
Did you?
This is kind of a famous one. Okay.
Well, now this part of the podcast is where we're supposed to talk about what we learned, and I have 3 sentences and Chelsea has nothing.
Oh, I learned something. I just didn't write it down.
Okay, I'll go first.
Okay, you go first.
Do I know what you learned?
No.
Okay. Oh boy, I can't wait.
It's a weird one.
Okay. So what did I learn?
Yeah, what did you learn?
I am still listening to my Stevie Nicks audiobook.
Mm-hmm.
It's not read by her, but it's about her.
Mm-hmm.
Fleetwood Mac is my favorite band, so I'm really enjoying that. And Chelsea and I just got sucked into some YouTube videos because Joni Mitchell played her first full set in over 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And she played it with Brandi Carlile at the Newport Folk Show. And it had Marcus Mumford and Taylor Dawes Goldsmith. And everybody was there. Winona was on stage.
Yeah.
And
this was a surprise performance by Joni Mitchell. Who had a stroke several years ago and has been unable to speak up until recently.
And sing.
Yeah. And she was just like jamming.
Oh,
the one clip of her playing the guitar is like probably my favorite part because she's just like shredding.
So when it was announced that she made a special appearance, of course, our Instagram and Twitter was exploding. And so we immediately just started watching all of the YouTube videos. And I was ugly crying watching her play. There was something very, oh gosh, it was so beautiful. So if you have not seen it, check out the Newport Folk Show from 2022, and you'll see Joni Mitchell playing a surprise performance with Brandi Carlile.
It's really cool because I was reading about how all of these like kids, like very young people, have discovered Joni Mitchell and are like, whoa, who's this Joni Mitchell person? All of a sudden they're like reintroduced to...
Yeah, this always happens. My kids rediscover people and I'm like, come on, man, where you been?
I mean, I will admit that when I was a teenager, this is a funny story. I misattributed the artistic credit. I called somebody who did a Joni Mitchell cover the person who like wrote the song, I think, on social media.
Oh, was it that parking lot song?
No, it was so Diana Krall is a jazz artist. She did a cover of Joni Mitchell's I can't even remember what song it was about at the time. I don't know, it doesn't matter. Anyway, Diana Krall did a cover of Joni Mitchell's song and I was like, oh yeah, this is a Diana Krall song. But I was like 16 and I didn't really know anything about music at all. And I like posted that in like a comment on Facebook or something. And this was back when you could be Facebook friends with famous people because they didn't have like pages or anything yet. And I'm Facebook friends with Jason Robert Brown, the Broadway composer. And that
was a humble brag.
Well, he somehow saw this comment and was like, yeah, that's not a song by Diana Krall. That's a song by Joni Mitchell.
You deserved it.
That was I absolutely did. 100%. I was like, oh, I didn't know. My bad. That's horrifying that I just got slapped by JRB also, but I deserved it. And ever since then, I have been quite deep into the obsession with Joni Mitchell's discography.
I did that with that NSYNC song. I think they did a Bread song at one point.
Oh no.
And I was like, deep in the NSYNC and my love of Lance Bass.
You don't know what you don't know. When you're a kid, you don't know
I wasn't
anything.
old enough to know Bread was a band.
Yeah.
It's like the day I found out Meatloaf. I was like, what?
But
are we just naming anything?
Well, I just love that story because it's like, I love being humbled by somebody who knows so much about music. But also it stuck with me so much. And now Joni Mitchell is one of my favorite artists of all time. So it was funny to me that it started so embarrassingly for me. But I deserved it. Kate
Bush is back now too. Look at us all coming full circle.
Yeah.
Because of her song in Stranger Things. Anyways.
The kids, the youth, they're being exposed to the greats.
They are.
Okay.
So
Anyway, cool.
I learned that last couple things. We're finishing The Wire. Mm-hmm. We have one more season. We have like 9 episodes left at this point. I think that's it. I think we're going to do C on Apple.
Do I get to talk about what I learned?
Yeah, I was just wrapping up what I learned.
Oh, I'm sorry. We usually do this after what
go
we both
ahead.
learned. No, it's okay.
What'd you learn?
I learned something botanical. I learned about hawthorn rust.
Go on.
You want to know more?
No.
Hawthorn rust?
No, this is not your TED Talk. Just briefly tell me.
Hawthorn rust is just something that happens to certain trees where it looks like their leaves turn this rusty orangey yellow color because of some sort of fungus, I think. Mm-hmm. That's it. That's all.
Why?
That's what I learned.
Why did you?
Why did I learn that? Because I follow a plant identification subreddit, and the email came to my inbox, and I didn't immediately delete it for once, and I fell down a rabbit hole, and I learned about it was some guy posting a picture of his tree. He's like, "What is this, and what's wrong with my tree, and how do I fix it?" And it's just a bunch of good citizens coming and telling him that it's hawthorn rust, and that he should go get such and such chemical to kill it.
Some of the worst citizens of the world.
But if you have hawthorn trees and the leaves get splotchy with like reddish yellow dots, and there are weird little pokey things on them, that's rust. It's not actual rust. They call it rust because of the visual effect of it. But yeah.
How do you get rid of it?
With chemicals.
Oh, no.
Of various sorts. I don't know. I didn't read too much about
that.
Well, it was like copper something. It looked dangerous, so I don't want to provide any information to listeners because I don't want to provide dangerous information.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I learned about hawthorn rust.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
That was good.
I'm sorry. Okay, so you were saying we want to watch C.
Our wrap up, I'll just start from the top. Mm-hmm. We're finishing The Wire.
Yeah.
It's been a great show.
Yeah.
It got very bad. It's getting much better.
You did not like...
Season 3 was awful.
Can we all agree that season 3 of The Wire was just... it shouldn't have happened?
No, there was nothing.
1 and 2 I think are good. You didn't
1
like 2
is
as
very
much.
good. 2 is slow.
Well,
3
you
is
like
bad.
the project's stories.
4 is really good.
Yeah.
4 might be better than 1.
So season 4 of The Wire is all about mostly about the
education
Baltimore
system.
city school system. Yep.
Yeah.
And how kids are failed by it, and how teachers try to work within it, and how administrators are pressured inside. It's a very good look at a microcosm of America's public school system and why it struggles so much. And you can see how much kids struggle with what they even just bring to the classroom, what's going on in their home lives. We've talked about that so many times on this pod, but it's a really good look into that kind of, it's just a good look.
So we're finishing that. I think we've already talked about this, but we're finally wrapping that up. I think C on Apple is next. We do need to watch Stranger Things. We just have to do it.
Yeah, I've been putting it off. Well, I was putting it off until the second half of the last season came out. Now it's all out. We got to do it. We're going to get it spoiled.
So we'll probably do Stranger Things, C. I think that's what's next. But if you have anything else worthwhile, please tell us.
Yeah, as you can tell, we're consumers of media, so we appreciate suggestions.
We saw a new Elvis movie by Baz Luhrmann.
Yeah, we did.
It's so good.
Kate's a big Elvis fan, so she liked it a whole lot. It's a pretty interesting movie. Good. I told her afterwards that I didn't really realize that Elvis was like cool.
Chelsea was like, Elvis was cool. Like, yeah. But,
well, again, I'm not familiar with Elvis.
That's like the most boring thing to say about Elvis.
This person here who's like obsessed with Elvis and knows everything about Elvis doesn't get why I don't get Elvis. But I would like to say,
I don't know how you can think he wasn't cool.
I didn't think he wasn't cool. I just didn't know that he was cool. That's what I mean. Like, by cool, I mean there's more going on with Elvis than what meets the pop culture eye as like a person of this era. Looking back on the Elvis years, like all you see are the kind of, you only hear about like the sort of what happened to him in his later life, and you see sort of snippets.
He died on the toilet. Snippets
of a guy gyrating his hips on stage, and you just don't necessarily get what all was going on with his life from the stories that are told now.
You are uncultured.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like the movie, I was like, oh, this guy was actually
cool,
doing something interesting beyond what is filtered through history now. So it's kind of an interesting.
Yeah, and I just love Baz Luhrmann. I would watch Baz Luhrmann everything. So.
Yeah, in case you're gonna go out and see it, the movie is mostly about the relationship between Elvis and his manager, the Colonel He's not actually a colonel, but they call him a colonel.
No, he called himself the colonel.
Yeah, he called himself the colonel. This guy who kind of took advantage of him from a business standpoint. So it's an interesting story.
That's it.
That's
everything.
It. Okay. Anything else?
That's all she wrote.
That's all she wrote. If you have any episode suggestions, please feel free to write us.
Please
we would love
give
to
us
hear
ideas.
From you. Oh, we have ideas, but we love to hear your ideas as well.
What do you like? What are you here for?
Yeah.
What kind of topics do you want to hear?
We'd love to hear from you.
We're having an identity crisis in episode 64.
Are we?
You started with one. I'm not sure about me now.
Well,
now I'm full of doubt.
You're full of doubt. Okay, right. So we've ended the show in full embrace of doubt.
We will see you. We will chat with you.
Yeah.
In 2 weeks.
In 2 weeks. Take care of yourselves. Enjoy the summer, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for supporting 16 to 1.
We're trying to grow our audience, so please check us out at 16to1.com, all spelled out, and tell your friends about the show.
On our website, you can find links to follow us on social media, an archive of all our old episodes, and a contact form where you can get in touch.
Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you next show.
Read
the Wikipedia page faster.
I'm trying.
Luxembourg.ask.jeeves.edu.